If you're struggling to finish your song, then this is the series for you. In this video, we are specifically talking about simple questions to ask yourself that can help you to finish your song's melodies. The first question is incredibly simple. It's just, what note in a chord haven't I started a melody with yet? So just as an example, let's say that your whole song is actually a 4-chord song and it just is built on the exact same chord progression the whole time. And to make it extra simple, we'll say that your entire song is built on the most common chord progression of all, which is the 1-5-6-4, which in the context of C major would simply be C major, G major, A minor, and F major. So this means that the beginning of every single one of your song sections starts with a C major chord. And very often the first note of your melody will match one of the notes of your chord. So if your song section starts with a C major chord, which has a C, an E, and a G, it's pretty likely that the first note of your melody will be a C, an E, or a G. So let's say you've only written your verse melody so far, and now you're looking to write your chorus melody. A great thing you can do is simply say, what note did I start my verse melody on? I started that on a C. So I'm using a C major chord, so let's start the chorus melody with not the C, but actually the E or the G from the chord instead. This at the very least gets you to start your melody on a different note, and that will probably inspire you in a different direction and just make it a little bit easier to move on and write a new melody for your song. An easy way to guarantee that is simply start the melody with a different note. A second question to ask yourself is, what rhythmic style haven't I used in a melody yet? So if your verse is very legato, then maybe you want to make your pre-chorus or your chorus more staccato. So if your verse goes something like this, then maybe in your chorus you want to do, because that is more staccato, and that immediately makes it stand out and be noticeably different. Another element of rhythmic style to consider is where your melodic phrases actually start. Do they start right on the beat? Do they actually start before the first beat of the measure, or do they start after the first beat of the measure? So on the beat with the first chord of your progression would be something like this. Starting the melody before the beat or before your chord starts would sound something like this. And then starting after the beat might sound something like this. Something else you can look at to change up the rhythm is something like long versus short notes. So if you had longer held out notes in your chorus, maybe something like this, then maybe you want to change it up and have something much shorter. And as a bonus tip to help you out, think about what melody is. Melody really is just two things. It's pitch plus rhythm. We can't have pitch without rhythm and form any form of melody, but we can have rhythm without pitch. So something that you can do, especially if you want to target the rhythm of your melody, is you actually can write the rhythm of your melody before you even start to worry about the notes or the pitches in your melody. An easy way to do this is to write a melody just with a single note at first and then figure out the different notes you separate it into. For instance, we could do something like, notice how I didn't change the note at all. I just had a rhythm all on a G note. So later, if we like that rhythm, then we can then figure out a way to change the pitches around. But it's easier to concentrate on the rhythm and really make sure we get the rhythm right, that it fits well with the song and is interesting in context of the song if we just write the rhythm first. We can even take that one step further and not use pitch at all. We can simply clap a rhythm for our melody. And once we have a clapping rhythm that we really like for our melody, then go that next step and try to sing over that, or use a keyboard or something else where we are now actually getting into the pitch part of the melody. But at first, we might just start with claps, where we are just figuring out the rhythm we could have with our melody. So we might have something like, and then later we can assign pitches to that rhythm. A third simple question to ask ourselves is, what phrase patterns haven't we used yet? It's really easy to default to a simple call answer pattern with all of our songs, otherwise known as something like an A-B-A-B pattern. And even with our rhymes, it's so easy to default to that same pattern, an A-B-A-B rhyme scheme, or its close sibling, the XA-XA rhyme scheme. So for both the rhyme schemes and the meter and our overall melody, there's nothing wrong with A-B-A-B in any way, but we don't want to just always default to A-B-A-B for everything we do, because there are so many other options, and a great way to make sure that our melodies in our songs don't all sound the same and we create clear separation between our verse and our pre-chorus, or our pre-chorus and our chorus, or our chorus and our bridge, is to simply look at the phrase patterns. So just to give you some patterns to start with, you could have A-A-A-A, you could have A-B-A-B, or A-A-A-B, or A-B-B-B, or A-B-A-C, or ABC, or A-A-B. Now, certainly that is not an exhaustive list, but in the majority of cases, our phrase patterns will be in groups of 2, 3, or 4. And in a way, you can usually see groups of 4 really as 2 groups of 2. This is why a ton of song sections are either 4 lines, 6 lines, or 8 lines long. Because song sections of 4 lines tend to be 2 groups of 2 lines. 6-line song sections tend to be 2 groups of 3 lines each. And then song sections that are 8 lines long tend to be 2 groups of 4 lines each, or sometimes 4 groups of 2 lines each. So when we have groups of 2, 3, or 4, there are only so many patterns that there are, and some of them just are more natural and are more commonly used than others. So let's say you've already written a melody with an A-B-A-B pattern, maybe something like this. This would be our A, then our B, then it would be A again. So A, B, A, B. So then maybe for your next song section's melody, you want to choose something different. So let's say instead we opt for something that is A, 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 B. So we'd have A again, and then finally B. So that would be an example of an A-A-A-B pattern. So simply looking at the phrase patterns you already have within the melodies you've written for your song, and simply choosing a new one can be a great way to go to continue writing your melody for your song. Question 4 is maybe the easiest question of all, which is simply, what pitch range haven't I used yet? One of the easiest and most effective ways to keep your melody interesting is simply to change the pitch range of your melody. If your verse is really low, then having your chorus simply just be noticeably higher can go a long way. And just as a general rule, which of course rules are meant to be broken, but this one is followed most of the time, usually you want your choruses to be higher than your verses. They don't have to be massively higher or anything, but generally speaking, you usually want your chorus to be higher in pitch on average than your verses. And then very often pre-choruses tend to be in the middle, and then bridges also tend to be somewhere in the middle, usually closer to the chorus pitch range than the verse pitch range, but these can vary greatly. Bridges can be anywhere in pitch, and so can pre-choruses. All sections can be, but if there's one rule that you're probably going to follow the vast majority of the time, it's that your chorus should be higher than your verse. And a fifth question to ask yourself is, does your song have any melodic surprises yet? Because if your song really hasn't had any melodic surprises yet, then maybe it's time to add some form of surprise to your melody. For example, if all your melodies tend to be very stepwise, meaning that almost all of your moves from one note to another are just in steps, so something like this, that was all steps, then maybe it would be time to move on and have some leaps in your melody. So instead of just doing for the whole song where you're just one step at a time, instead for one section you go. Notice how there were some big leaps thrown in. Now, just as a note here, you don't want to put melodic leaps just anywhere. Almost always when you have a melodic leap, that will naturally highlight that part of the melody and thus also naturally highlight that lyric. So you want to make sure that the lyrics you have in that section are worthy of the highlight that the leap provides. But then on the other side, if you already have a lot of melodic leaps in your song, something you can do is actually go in the opposite direction and have a more static melody. For instance, something you can do is actually have a whole song section or just a portion of your song section where the melody is actually fairly static and doesn't move much at all. In fact, as a fun experiment, you could even challenge yourself, hey, I'm going to write a bridge and try to make an interesting melody where it literally is the same exact note the whole time. Because very often melodic interest does come from the pitches, but melodic interest also very much comes from the rhythm. So if we have a really interesting rhythm in our melody, we can even get away with having a pitch that doesn't change at all and have it still be interesting. But of course, we don't have to take it that far. Instead, we could opt for something like what Celine Dion does in My Heart Will Go On, which I did a whole video breaking down that song, so be sure to check that out for more on this. But basically in the verse, that melody really doesn't go much of anywhere. A lot of that verse is really just as simple as that was just 2 notes, and that was most of that melody. Yes, it goes up a little bit more and changes a little bit, but a lot of the melody is just 1 note, down for a brief moment. That's all it is. And yet it is absolutely captivating. So we can have really interesting melodies that don't really go much of anywhere. So if your song has a lot of leaps and really does go a lot of places, you might want to move in the opposite direction and have a more static melody that doesn't move quite as much. And then another thing to look for that maybe we don't think about enough is ascending versus descending melodies. We all are going to have tendencies. Maybe you tend towards ascending melodies. Maybe I tend towards descending melodies. But a great thing to look at is, hey, do I have all mostly descending melodies in my song so far? It might be worth it to then intentionally say, okay, I've written my verse, I've written my pre-chorus, I've written my chorus, and all of those melodies tend to be kind of ascending. So in my bridge, I'm going to make sure to write a melody that is more descending. Just in general, think about something that you can add to your melody that would be a bit of a surprise, because little surprises in our melody can be a great way to go to keep our melodies interesting. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, something else you'll likely find helpful is my free guide on 20 different ways to start writing a song, because finishing songs is tough, but sometimes starting songs is tough too. And sometimes the reason we get stuck later in our songs is because we started our songs the same way we always do. If we always start our song with a guitar chord progression, then eventually, oftentimes, we feel like our songs start to sound the same and it's harder and harder to be inspired. But simply changing how we start our song can give us a huge creative boost. Something as simple as deciding to start your song with a bass line, or starting with melody first, or reverse engineering a song based on a cool song title that you like. The free cheat sheet has 20 different ways to start writing a song, my free gift to you, so be sure to check that out. It's at songwritertheory.com/free guide. Link in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.